Responding to a comment regarding Cuba's current dire situation, I'm going to skip over this Israel commune thing. They were an example of, a communist community that was successful. They contributed greatly to the Israeli economy, even though they were a very small percentage. I said, though central planning has huge challenges, it's not as cut and dry as the indoctrination you're under regarding the people who are so anti-communist because they really don't understand economics. They're just under that indoctrination. Now, the only other thing I said, which I touched on in one of the other videos, is Cuba historically has similar standards of similar living standards to other countries that have their same geopolitical history. So you really get, the point is that when you're comparing people, you're going to compare their situation. For instance, in sports, you're not going to compare a male to a female. In fruit, you're not going to compare an apple to an orange. They're two completely different things. If you want a good apple, you're going to compare it to other apples, not an orange. So it's really difficult to judge these countries unless you're comparing them to ones with similar geopolitical histories. And even then, there can be events that totally alter things. A good example of that would be like Cuba versus Puerto Rico, but I'm not going to get into that here. That really definitely deserves its own video. I really want to talk about that. I've written about it before. I've talked about it before, but not on this public forum here. So, yeah, so if we look at Cuba's standard of living before all these embargoes and this U.S. basically trying to destroy Cuba, they had one of the highest standards of living. Again, I'm not arguing in favor of doing what they were doing. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just taking an objective look, and the fact of the matter is that amongst a lot of the Central American countries that were descended from Spain, they had one of the highest standards of living. Again, of course, there was definitely bad things about the country, but as far as economically speaking, they were obviously not in a good situation, but they were still amongst their peers. They were doing right, So you could make an argument that you just improve upon that system. You could. I'm not making that argument because I have my own beliefs that I've developed on my own. But yeah, this is something that just people don't consider. They want to consider like Cuba to England or USA. It's like those countries have two completely different situations. USA and England had first movers advantage in the Industrial Revolution, and Spain was completely left out of that, and therefore by default Cuba would also be left out of default. So they're at a huge disadvantage as far as leverage goes, economically speaking.